Okay, so we're going to be talking a little bit about self-discipline today and things that relate to it. It stems back to a conversation that I have all the time with our students and student athletes, and then our college kids and our post-college kids who are then in the workforce and or running their own companies. And one of the questions is always, especially for the successful, really successful people, ends up being, what one action or characteristic would I say that I see that's common in those who end up being the most successful? And one of them has to be self-discipline. And so this conversation came up several times this last week, and as we get closer to kids making decisions for college and or finalizing committing to schools by putting the deposit or whatever, this pops up again and again because they want to be successful, and the people who are asking already have self-discipline. So it's kind of ironic in a way. But so this might be for those parents or other people who haven't asked or who don't have as much self-discipline. But a couple of things that's important to realize is, one, as it relates to self-discipline, you can't necessarily know if you have something if you don't know what the word means. And so we talk about this all the time. Your vocabulary either enriches or kind of limits your experiences. So you need a good vocabulary, and it needs to be not like alternative facts or my truth kind of a thing. It needs to be the word and the meaning of the word as it relates to what's in the dictionary is what you need to go by. So let's break down some of those words first really quick. Willpower. I've got them up on the board here, and then also I'm going to show you on the screen so that you can see them. So willpower, here we go. Willpower is the ability to control your own thoughts and behavior. Kelly McGonigal has a great TED Talk on this and also a book. We'll get into what these mean and how they play off each other later. Self-discipline, the ability to make yourself do things when you should. Reminds me of David Allen and his whole concept of getting things done in his book and his different seminars. Next we go into self-control. Control over your emotions and actions. Reminds me of Charles Duhigg and his book, The Power of Habit, and how habits allow you to kind of have a little bit more self-control over yourself without even really thinking about it in the moment. And then we have grit, which reminds me of Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, Bravery and Strength of Character. She has a bigger meaning than that, but for practical purposes of today and trying to get things done, we'll just leave it at that. Next one is work ethic. The belief that work is valuable as an activity and is morally good. Reminds me of Napoleon Hill. And so we'll talk about that for a second. So again, willpower. If you have good habits, for starters, if you have good habits and you know what your real goal is, and this relates to some of the words down here on the bottom. If you know what your real goals are, what your real chief aim is, what your purpose is, what your vision or mission is, then it's a lot easier to create a system or an environment for yourself. Again, over here, environment of influence, and that's everyday consistent. That creates the success. So those habits that you put into place, if they're helpful habits, then what ends up happening is you don't need as much willpower because you don't need as much strength to do something outside of something that's habitual. So if your habits aren't as productive, then you're going to force stress on yourself in order to make sure that you exhibit self-control and then self-discipline eventually when you actually show that you understand what you need to do. So they all kind of play together, and then grit is kind of that whole, like, I'm gonna get it done, gonna be gritty, that person that kind of digs in, that leads into the next words that we're going to talk about, that stoic kind of mindset or way of being. But one of the other things is, in the meaning of work ethic, here's the thing. The key word in there is valuable. Work is valuable. And valuable, breaking that down to value. So the ability and the sense to understand what you place value on, and that's why work ethic is such a key thing, because it means what it really means, and people mistake what it means, and they sometimes blow it out of proportion. It's just the belief that work is valuable as an activity. So if you believe it's valuable and you know the impact that it has, then you're going to put more into it. You're going to invest. You're going to follow through. You're going to do the right thing, so to speak. So that's a real key takeaway. As we get into the next ones here, Stoic. So we have Stoic. Stoic, not showing or feeling any emotion. I think of Seneca. I think of Marcus Aurelius, Ryan Holiday, Tim Ferriss. They all talk about Stoicism. Their books from Seneca, books from Marcus Aurelius, phenomenal for learning about Stoicism. It's a great way to really reflect on life and to kind of go about your daily habits. And there's so much out there to actually use that to your advantage. That's a whole another 5-hour discussion right there. Then we talk about, this kind of relates to Stoicism, Spartan, the simple and not particularly comfortable. Joe DeSena, the Spartan races, Spartan podcast, all that stuff. It's really talking about delayed gratification and understanding that what you're doing is going to take you through a process that might be painful at times, but you're focused on the goal and getting things done, and then in the end you get that joy, that gratification, but you've got to delay that. So it's not, and you're going to get some feedback along the way that might not be super positive, but you kind of like, you're gritty and you're pushing through it. And that leads us to the next group, which is mindset. So mindset right there and right here, a person's way of thinking and their opinions. I think of Peter Diamandis and his abundance mindset. I think of Carol Dweck and her growth mindset, and we'll talk about that in a second. That growth mindset right here, I'll hold it up there, I'll just read it to you. A growth mindset, the way it differs from a fixed mindset is the way you react to challenges, obstacles, effort, criticism, success of others. So in a fixed mindset, challenges are avoided, obstacles are given up on easily, effort is seen as fruitless or worthless, criticism is ignored and considered negative, success of others is considered threatening. Whereas a growth mindset considers embracing challenges, it persists in the face of setbacks and obstacles. They see effort as the path to mastery. They learn from criticism. They seek out criticism because they know that's how they grow, and they find lessons and inspiration from the success of others. So it's very different. And here's a couple of other pictures that you might be able to see and do a screenshot on. Just some phenomenal information out there on mindset, the growth mindset anyway. And then we go to, I think one of the key examples to take away from just some of this basic stuff is the fact that the difference between just using willpower versus utilizing your habits is like no thanks to the bad food. That's willpower. Choosing the good food kind of would be more relying on habits. So you can use willpower, and we advise you to do so, but it's important to understand that your habits create that environment that then your willpower sits upon. And if you can actually utilize that to the best of your ability, it'll be really helpful. If you don't, then this is your chart. You basically force yourself into using willpower, into saying no to situations where you're forcing yourself into relying on those old habits instead of the new ones. That could be really helpful for you. And unfortunately, if you're not utilizing everything together to help you be more sustainable, then you stick yourself in a situation where you're forcing stress on your willpower. And which is okay, some people do that, but there's a simpler way to do that. There's a less stressful way to do that, and that's where you really get some really high performers, people that just seem to be surrounded by abundance. And so the last one is belief system. A belief system right here, the set of principles or tenets which together form the basis of a religion, philosophy, or a moral code. And so your belief systems, they impact you so much. On the bottom here, I'm going to pull this off so that you guys can see this, but on the bottom, what we have is your purpose. So here we go, purpose, values, focus, habits, beliefs, vocabulary, decisions, attitude, communication, and then we over here, rules, references, and imagination. So what all that means is we're talking about how to get things done the most effective way